And she comes right up to my face and pulls her mask down and says like, why don't you just die?
Whoa!
And then smiles, and it's just like sharp teeth.
What?
I get emotional if I even think too long about how I felt that day. We go meet my family doc. We show him the report. He sees the report. I'm like, what do you make of this? And he's like, take your miracle.
Ruslan.
My wife and I are hanging out, and I clear my throat. This is July 24th, 2022. So this is way later. This is like post-book, post-moving out west, different kind of life. Clear my throat, and I feel something in my mouth, and I put my fingers in, and when I pull them away, they're just covered in blood. And I look at my wife, and she's wide-eyed, mouth stretched. I'm like, call 911. I sprint to the bathroom, start coughing up. It's like frothy red, smells like tin. I grab the garbage bucket that's in beside our toilet, and I'm like, we got to go. She says there's no ambulances, so we sprint.
That's crazy, by the way. You guys are out west, and
we're out west in Canada.
Oh,
we not to get too political, but there has been legislation that has passed that has jammed up our emergency system so that people who are coughing up blood have to drive themselves in.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
So we get in, and then, dude, like I'm carrying a garbage bucket, and it's like half full. So like I cough up like a liter of blood, and they take some of my blood, not from the bucket. They draw it from my arm. They want to test if it's cancer. They want to see what's going on. It eventually slows down. And so like I go into the ICU, and the first surgery I have is this thing called the bronchoscopy. What they do is they pseudo put you to sleep. They put a bunch of tubes down your throat. They want to see what's going on in your lung, and then they spot freeze it. So like they freeze it, help everything clot. And then what they were planning is to do all these surgeries. So what they do is they like cut in through your femoral artery near your groin, send a catheter up. You have to be awake the whole time because you have to do all this breathing stuff. Yeah. They go all the way up into your lungs, and then the first time what they do is they're just mapping. So they're shooting out contrast dye. You take a big breath in, you're on the table, big thing takes a picture of you, and then like all these experts are in the room watching, and they're like, this kid's lungs are a mess.
Were you like a heavy smoker? Or
yeah,
like
I used to smoke cigars, but like I had zero damage, like smoking damage from my lungs, super active, ate really well, worked out. I was a big runner. Yeah. Literally, like, other than the smoking, cigars, like, as healthy as
you could be
a horse.
But you're saying the cigars there was no
Didn't do
smoke
anything.
damage,
Like, I asked my doctor, and I was like, listen, like, he's like, dude, are you a smoker? I was like, yeah, I smoke cigars. And then when he went in and examined all the tissues, like, you have no damage to your lung from smoking. So this is just something different. So I'm in the hospital that first time for 3 weeks. The first night, this is where I think the spiritual warfare comes in. I'm in the ICU. Everyone else in the ICU that night dies. And I have this moment where a nurse comes in. You introduced me as a charismatic. I'm not like super charismatic. Like I do believe in all the gifts and love when they're practiced. But the stories I end up telling you right now are very like supernatural stories, which is normally not my MO. So like this nurse comes in, and she like flicks a needle. I think she's going to draw some blood, do the whole thing. And she comes right up to my face and pulls her mask down and says like, why don't you just die?
Whoa!
And then smiles, and it's just like sharp teeth.
What?
Yeah, I kid you not.
Wait, was this like a vision?
So I ring the bell, and I'm like, they come sprinting because they think I'm coughing up blood. And I'm like, listen, am I on anything that's going to make me hallucinate? Yeah. And they're like, you're on nothing. And so like, I'm petrified. I call my wife. She got sent home that night. Yeah. She was 3 months pregnant when this whole thing started. And she just drives right over. She's like, you got to put on worship music. You got to like, this is something else.
Was this a physical being or a vision?
I have no clue. Like my eyes were open. I was just like sitting there. Yeah, scary as hell, literally. And so like that first season, I'm in the hospital for 3 weeks. I lose 2 liters of blood. We go through the process of making sure like Aislinn has all my banking information, all the business information, that anything I'm working on gets directed to her. My parents fly out, and I'm like, listen, if I don't make it, my wife's 3 months pregnant. She's going with you guys. We know we're having a boy. You raised 2 boys. Like we had to go through the whole process of like, if you don't make it. Yeah. But I had this thing in me. It's like, I got to see my son. Like no matter what happens, I'm gonna live with my wife. I'm gonna be a husband. I'm gonna be a dad. So we get through the 3 weeks in the hospital. I stopped bleeding. So I coughed up 2 liters of blood, almost died the 3 times. And
When you say almost died at 3 times, what does that mean?
so like if you lose a ton of blood all at once, you're like touch and go.
Oh, wow.
So they didn't have to do a transfusion. Thank God for being like a young man who worked out. Like but a transfusion doesn't save you when you start losing blood. It saves you by replenishing blood like the day after. I think I'm not an expert. So like you lose a liter of blood. If you lose I think a full grown man has like 5 or so liters. And if you lose like around 2 liters in a short time frame, like that might be it. And so like I'd lost 2 liters within 5 days. And so I'm in the hospital for 3 weeks. We leave and we think it's done. And so my doctor says to me, the respirologist says to me, you come back in 3 months. If you don't bleed for 3 months, we're pretty much done, but we're going to monitor you. 3 months to the day, I cough up a little speck and I go into the hospital. The doctor tells me if I have anything to see him. I show him, I get some scans. He's like, Josh, you're not bleeding. You're okay. It's probably just like old stuff, or it's probably like a little thing from your nose, your throat, if you had a cold. So we leave the Emerge crying with joy. We go out for sushi. We put on a movie. We get home. I fall asleep on the couch because I was just gassed. I was tired from waiting. And then I sit up and I'm just coughing up tons of blood again.
My gosh.
And this is on and off. So this goes on and off for a year. From like for another 9 months. We have our first son at this time. So I'm a shadow of like myself. And
because you're just tired.
Dude, I'm gassed.
I'm losing blood
all the time. I'm sleeping like 12 hours a day. I take a 2-hour nap. So my wife is essentially a single mom, but not just a single mom. She also has to take care of me because I can't do anything. I wrote a ton of this book in the hospital actually. And so I have another major mishap. This is in June of 2023.
The Occupy Till I Come 60-day devotional is back in stock. This is taking you through the entire narrative of the scriptures in 60 days with custom daily devotional prompts. So what you're doing is you're spending 35 days in the Old Testament, 25 days in the New Testament, going over all the major stories. There's additional reading for you to go deeper if you want to go deeper on the stories. And you can get them right now bundled up with a virtual ticket to our Bless God Summit. Bless God Summit is coming up March 27th, 28th, 29th in beautiful Southern California. My favorite podcasters, apologists, pastors, preachers, entrepreneurs, all in the same room. Day 1, we're talking about apologetics. Day 2, we're talking about virtue. Day 3, we're going out into the marketplace and being the hands and feet of Jesus. This is going to be a wonderful event. And what you could do is you could actually get the devotional bundled with the virtual ticket for only $65. So go to blessgodshop.com, get yourself a 60-day devotional. I promise you the feedback on these has been crazy. You will love it. Designed by my guy, Josh Nadeau from Sword and Pencil. The beautiful artwork, okay? So go to blessgod.shop, get yours now, okay? Mean the world to me.
And I'm coughing up tons of blood. I get a surgery. And normally when you have a surgery, you're okay for a while. So I have a surgery. A week later, I cough up more blood than I've coughed up in months. So I'm in the hospital and I posted on Instagram and all these people start messaging me. I was mentioning this to you. Like, I lost my brother this week. I lost my sister. I lost my kid to cancer, to this, whatever. And I just had this like out of body experience, like in this, not like a supernatural experience. I just like felt like I was looking at my life with a clarity for like a moment. Instead of being so afraid of if I'm going to bleed to death, I'm like, Josh, you're not the only person suffering. There are tons of people suffering. And so I decided to just run through my Instagram this day of fasting and prayer. And so like 3,000 or 4,000 people sign up. We do this day of fasting and prayer. And then there's this like weekend to me that is like transformative. So on the Friday, we do the day of fasting and prayer. And we pray the hours. So we pray for, the hour starts out, we pray for like God just to bless us, speak to us, minister to us. And then every hour we're praying for people, like legitimate people, but ideas, like people who have miscarried, people who want to have kids who can't, people who have like undiagnosed diseases, who have cancer, all kinds of stuff. And then I found tons of ancient prayers. I have all these old prayer books that I was like, listen, I just poured over them. I found them. So here's the thing. Here's a prayer you can do, and then take time. So that's the Friday. The Saturday, it's literally a year to the day of my first bleed. And we bump into some friends of the family. And we are chatting with them. They're like, Josh, how you doing? And I'm like, I don't know. I was bleeding just last week. Like, it's pretty garbage. And Aislinn decides to tell them. The doctors thought they found something it could have been. So she decides to tell them what this thing is. It's called like aspergillosis, which is like a fungal infection. But it wasn't that. So she says it, and this lady says, my best friend's sister has that. Let me get in contact with you. So we get in contact with her. We find you can go on some drugs. They're super expensive. And whatever. Sunday comes around. My old pastor is in town from Toronto over out west. I normally don't go on Instagram Sunday mornings. I go on and I see him take a picture of the lake that I go hang out at. And I'm like, this is my lake. And he's like, yeah, I'm just down the road. You guys should come visit. So he's a half-hour drive away. And so we go, and he's preaching a sermon on suffering. And he's like old school Pentecostal. And so he starts like, he's like, come on, I'm preaching now. And he's like preaching, but it's from the book of Joshua. And he's like, come, like, Joshua, would you, I'll get emotional if I even think too long about how I felt that day. Could you endure a little longer? Could you be strong and courageous? And if, for the sake of others, you can keep going, would you? And I'm like bawling my eyes out the back. He doesn't know what I'm going through, right? Like, I mean, a little bit following my Instagram, but he didn't know that's where I live and that I'm going to go to church that morning. And so they pray for me. It's Sunday, and I'm going home, and I'm like, Lord, I don't know how long this path is. But it's the same thing. Like, if this is the opportunity if this is what I need to become a saint, like, so be it. Fine. So I just, like, I had this mental thing where I was trying to transition from this life of fear and life is happening to me and at me to be like, okay, I can begin to, like, become in this new space. Monday rolls around, and I got to do work. Like, I still have to work. And so my wife takes our kid, he's 6 or 7 months old at this point, to the beach. She goes to a different beach. She's like, feels like she should go to this different beach for the first time. So she goes there, and there's this lady looking over at her, and she's like, oh, your kid's so beautiful. Your kid's so cute. Aren't they amazing? And every time she says something, she's like pulling her towel closer to Aislinn and Ransom. And my wife, Aislinn, is like, do you have any of your own? And the lady's like, yeah, I do, but we're not really on talking terms. And Aislinn's like, why? And she says, when I was pregnant, my husband cheated on me. And now my daughter is like torn between the family and there's been falling out. And so like she's getting emotional. She's sharing this stuff with Aislinn. And Aislinn's like, oh, I'm so sorry. They pray for each other. She turns out to be a Christian. And then Aislinn says, like, since you've been vulnerable with me, I want to be vulnerable with you. Like, this has been the hardest year of my life. Like, my husband we don't know if he's going to make it. He's been in and out of the hospital. We have a kid. And I just don't know what's going to happen. And the lady says to my wife, I know. God told me to come to the beach today. God says he's going to heal your husband. He just has to walk it out. And I have not bled since that day of fasting and prayer.
Wow.
And so then I get a scan. So like a year goes by. First off, it's awesome not to bleed. But in between, you're just like, I could bleed at any moment. And so there's this like mental, spiritual game of like, I'd always bleed at night. So I'd go to sleep in the spare room because we thought I still needed to sleep. And I'd wake up in the middle of the night. And if I had to clear my throat, I'd be like, it's blood. I'm going to die. Whatever. The whole thing. So a year later, so 6 months later, I go in for a CT scan. And what they do, you get the needle in your arm, contrast goes through. They can see the mapping out of the arteries in your lungs. And it takes a few days, like a week or two, to review by the docs. And so there's one night I wake up in the middle of the night, go to the bathroom, and I just get this. I'm like, I know the report's in online because it's just been a few days. I guarantee it's in, and I'm horrified to look at it. I'm glad I haven't bled in 6 months, but if I look at it and it's like all your arteries are hypertrophied, you're going to just be down in the dumps again. So I pull it open, I read the report, and the report, it's like Josh Nadeau, history of bleeding, blah, blah, blah. Last sentence says the airspace disease in the lower left lung is completely remediated. I like fall down to my knees, bawling my eyes out. I burst into my wife's room, like the master, because I'm sleeping in the spare, because we think like sleep and keeps inflammation down. And I wake her up and she's like, no, you're bleeding. And I was like, no. So we come out, my son doesn't wake up. We come out, I show her. So we're bawling our eyes out. We go meet my family doc. We show him the report. He sees the report. I'm like, what do you make of this? And he's like, take your miracle. Like, this is irreversible. I go see the respirologist a month later, ask him the same question. He's like, how you feeling, Josh? I'm like, I feel strong again. Like, I feel like there's color and heat in my body. I don't have to drink tea every 2 seconds. I don't have to like take lozenges. I'm like, what do you make of like what you see in the CT scan? He's like, listen, you were bleeding all the time. You're not bleeding. We don't know why. And your lungs, like we would do a surgery here and 15 dead arteries that were bleeding disappear. Like, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, take your miracle. Then he says to me, you have this irreversible disease called bronchiectasis, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's irreversible. The only thing you do in your life is make sure it doesn't get any worse. And all that's going through my head is what this lady says to my wife at the beach. You have to walk out your healing. So I'm like, okay, Lord, like, I don't know what that means, but like, I'm going hardcore. So just like, I tightened up my whole life. You talk about like for you when you're struggling with all the stuff going on when you're on tour, whatever, like food was on point. We got like super granola, dude. It was like all farmers markets, organic, non-GMO, everything. I ate carnivore pretty much exclusively. We did tons of fasting and praying. We did the whole thing. So fast forward 1 year. This is literally like 2.5 months ago. I go in for another CT scan. They go to map out how my lungs are. And a few days later, I get a call from my family doctor. And my family doctor is awesome, but he never reaches out. So I tell my wife, I'm like, hey, we got to get ready for some bad news. Like if things have gotten worse again, then we got to like, I don't know what we do next, but we got to be ready. So he goes, Josh, I was looking at your CT scan, and he's like, if I didn't know what you had, I'd say your lungs are perfect. But I know what you have. So like there's still some small stuff we want to work on. But he's like, so I'm like, what are you saying? Like, is this bronchiectasis, this irreversible thing? He's like, yeah, most of it's gone.
Wow. The irreversible thing, most
reversed.
of it's gone. Wow.
So go the day my wife gives birth, January 21st, I have a meeting with my respirologist in the hospital. So she finishes giving birth. We're chilling as a family. I sprint over to the respirology department. I meet with him for half an hour. I sprint right back. And he pulls up. I have the pictures on my phone. I can show you after.
Yeah.
He pulls up my lungs last year, so like end of 2023, and then he pulls up my lungs end of 2024. And he's like, here's the dilation, here's the bronchiectasis, and here's the 2 spots in your lungs. I was like, what are the chances that this thing reverses?
Yeah.
He's like, 0. I know of one other person that's happened to in like my 30 years of doing this professionally. And so I'm like, you call it a miracle again? Like I told you, God was healing me. And he just kind of sheepishly looks at me and like, he gives a wink. And he's like, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, I don't want to be on record being like, yeah, you got 2 miracles. And like, I told him, like, can we do 1 more in 6 months so I can get 3 for 3?
Yeah.
All my Catholic and Orthodox friends online message me. They're like, if you get 3, you're a saint. Because you need 3 miracles.
Sure.
And I was like, no, guys. Anyway, so like to be on, like I'm telling you, this book was like step 1 of like my learning to embrace the way of the saint. Feel like the lesson God told me. That whole healing story, just to say this, I was bleeding to death, and now I'm so thankful for blood in my veins and arteries and air in my lungs. But I should have been just as thankful. July 23rd, 2022, or July 23rd, 2022, before I was bleeding. Every day is a gift. Every day is an opportunity. All is gift. I was just too blind to realize that everything that's coming my way is actually the good and true and beautiful life God has for me. It took me, again, I think I'm so dumb and stupid, like to be brought to the brink of life, to turn around and be like, holy smokes, I had everything. So yeah, miracle upon miracle, dude. Like life is pretty awesome.
That's incredible, man. You know, the cool thing is you connected it to the mushroom trip, which you know you shouldn't have done, yet, meaning the sickness, potentially you feel like you opened yourself up.
Yeah.
But even in that, like, God is still good and still...
Yeah. You know what?
Still healed you. Hey, thank you so much for checking out the video. Please be sure to comment below and subscribe and all that good stuff. And check out this other video that YouTube seems to be recommending just for you. Let me know if they nailed it. All right? I'll see you over there. Peace.